Joining me now, Katie Pavlich, townhall.com news editor and Fox News contributor. Katie, so all of this makes you wonder at what point, and we see this in every administration, do they start to shift gears? Do they start to perhaps even look at changing some of the deck chairs and some of the people who are advising the president? I haven't, heard a lot about that, but I think it's something that we are going to hear a little bit more about if these numbers continue to be the way they are.
Absolutely. We've already heard from Chad Pergram that there were some rumors about replacing Vice President Kamala Harris in the House with some of the procedures that were happening there. But you're right. And the first people who are often in front are the chief of staff, the White House press secretary, who, of course, is in charge of the communications for the country to sell the president's agenda. Well, they're not selling it from an economic perspective, and they're certainly not selling it from a communications perspective as they tell Americans that the costs that they're seeing, A, aren't really happening, and B, aren't the fault of the government spending too much money. I think that what you're going to see is the president having to make a choice between the far left, which is running his economic agenda, Bernie Sanders in charge of the Senate Budget Committee, and the economists who he put on his Council of Economic Advisors, who are very far left, who've rejected the Larry Summers version of Democrat economic theory that was put into place under even President Obama. And they have decided they are going to take the country in a fundamentally different direction. And to them, their economic philosophy is the inflation costs that the country is going through right now. The ends justify the means. And to get to this idea of having more government social services, to expand the social state in FDR-like style under President Biden, they're going to have to push for these economic policies. Yeah. But as you're seeing, the country isn't buying that. So a shakeup of the people advising him on the economy is what is going to save him if it's not too late.
Yeah. One of the battles that they're having between Senator Manchin and this bill and the supporters of this bill is the child tax credit, which was added in as a measure during the worst parts of COVID. And Manchin is saying, that doesn't fit into this bill. We'd have to deal with that separately. Here's Jean-Pierre, who's the deputy press secretary, talking about, you can tell that they have increasing anger towards him over this issue. Watch.
He thinks it is, reprehensible that Republicans are standing against it, and not voting for Build Back Better is essentially voting, or not supporting it is essentially not supporting such a middle-class tax cut for families that has been critical over these past several months.
What do you think, Katie?
Well, because Build Back Better has completely failed because they went too big in the first place to capitulate to the left, they are now trying to use an emotional argument of saying that if you don't vote for this monstrous multi-trillion-dollar bill, which will add $3 trillion to the deficit, according to some estimates, then you don't like families and you're not willing to help families at a time when they are still hurting. Joe Manchin has said that the child tax credit has been presented dishonestly, and that it hasn't been presented as a permanent program, and therefore it's not completely baked into the cost of what the Biden White House is saying it's going to be. And so they are now turning to an emotional argument and trying to make this about not caring about families when it's really about stopping a multi-trillion-dollar bill, which will make inflation and the cost for childcare for families go up in the end.
Katie, I want to ask you a quick question before I go, because we'd be remiss to leave this out. The Voting Rights Act is sort of where they're pivoting right now and trying to get that through. And Kristen Sinema is reminding her fellow Democrats that she's not going to budge on a filibuster change or any changes to the rules. So what do you make of that sort of last gasp effort at the voting rights bill when it doesn't look like they're going to have a different equation for passing it?
Well, the first thing is that Democrats want a federal takeover of elections, especially going into the midterms in 2022. And the bottom line is that this week, with Build Back Better not getting over the finish line before Christmas, really makes President Biden on his way to a lame duck. It's going to be very difficult for them to bring back that unpopular piece of legislation for passage next year in an election year when Democrats like Kristen Sinema have a much higher approval rating back at home in Arizona than Joe Biden does on the national level. So it's going to be very difficult for him to convince Democrats like her to walk the plank on these very fundamental changes to the process because the administration can't get the president's agenda through.
Well, these polls show that Manchin and Sinema are more where voters are, especially independent voters. And so you just wonder if over the course of the holidays, the president, kicks back for a little bit and starts looking at all of it and saying, what do I need to do to make this work? Because it's early in his presidency. Katie, thank you very much. Great to have you with us, as
Thanks,
always.
Martha.
Good to see
Have a
you,
good
Katie.
one. You too.
You
Thanks.
too.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.